just to introduce the team today, so you've got myself, I'm Dawn, and Robert will also be part of the session monitoring the chat box. So if anyone has got any questions throughout the session, please feel free to pop those in the chat box today. And as we've demonstrated, your cameras and mics are enabled. If we could ask you to keep those turned off throughout the session, and then there will be an opportunity to ask questions throughout. As we've just said, the session is being recorded today. If you have got a question at the end of the session, please feel free to raise your hand using the raise hand function, or alternatively use the chat box. And for anybody that's on the call that's hard of hearing, you can use the transcript function, which is where the 3 dots are at the top or bottom of your screen. Okay. So I just want to introduce today our keynote speakers for mindfulness and behavioural activation. So we've got Nicola Phillips and Thomas Finnegan. So I'm going to hand over to you guys. Thank you.
So welcome, thank you for joining us today for our presentation. So we've just been introduced. I'll just tell you a little bit about myself and hand you over to my colleague Tom as well. So my name's Nicola Phillips. I'm the clinical lead in the new long-term conditions team from IAPT. I'm a qualified CBT therapist. And I'll just let Tom introduce himself as well before we start.
Hello, my name's Tom Finnegan and I'm an assistant psychologist with IAPT in the south of the county.
Okay. So we're doing a talk today on behavioural activation and mindfulness. Just go through with you what we're going to be covering today so you know what's coming up. So we're going to look at first what is depression. I'm going to just talk to you a little bit about that, and then we're going to talk to you about CBT, so cognitive behavioural therapy. We're going to look at the cycle of depression and inactivity. We're also then going to introduce behavioural activation and how this can help with low mood, and talk to you about mindfulness, so what it is and what it isn't, the benefits of doing activities mindfully, and also mindful exercise as well. We're going to complete a mindfulness exercise with you as well as part of our presentation today. So what is depression? Well, it's a low mood, a feeling of low mood, and it's quite a personal experience. So people will experience it differently. It'll be different for different people, but there are some common shared symptoms. So I'm going to go through those common shared symptoms with you, and then I'm going to speak to you a little bit about the context of them. So these are the ones that people with depression will experience. So feeling down for most of the day, which will be nearly every day, a decreased interest or pleasure in their activities most of the days, a change in appetite and weight will also be experienced. Sleep problems like waking up early or not being able to get off to sleep, tiredness or loss of energy, which would be nearly every day, a feeling of guilt or worthlessness, struggling to concentrate, also noticing negative thoughts. Now, those negative thoughts will often be about yourself, so I'm not good enough, I'm a failure. They'd also be about others as well. Other people don't like me, they don't want me around, and they'd also be about the future. So being quite hopeless about the future is a really common thought process for somebody with depression. Now, some of these may look quite familiar. You know, we all experience some of these from time to time, but for somebody with depression, it will be the length of time that they've experienced them for. They're persistent and they're not there for any particular reason, such as losing a job or relationship breakup, or if they are, they continue, and that low mood will continue.
So thinking a bit more about CBT now. So we're going to speak a bit more about behavioural activation today, and that's one of the techniques we use in CBT or cognitive behavioural therapy. And there's 2 main things to really think about CBT. So the first one is the fact that it works on the belief that it's not necessarily an event or a situation in itself that leads somebody to feel distressed. Quite often it's someone's perception or view about that event or situation. And the second part is the link between your thoughts, emotions, physical sensations, and behaviors, the things you either do or don't do, and how these influence and interact with each other to maintain low mood or depression. And that's into something that we call a CBT cycle. And that cycle of depression and activity is an example of those. So obviously just trying to change your mood or telling yourself to change your mood isn't that easy. And quite often if someone was to say to us, cheer up, relax, calm down, actually makes us feel a little bit worse. But what CBT does is it provides you with tools and techniques to help change your mood, whether that's by changing the things you do, which we're going to look at a bit more today, or to help you change the way you think in order to improve your mood. And CBT is currently the recommended approach for depression as well. So this is the cycle of depression and inactivity. And as you can see, you have your physical sensations, feeling lethargic and sluggish, and that can impact your behavior, so leading you to do less things, which then leads you to feel worse in your mood, which is probably going to increase those feelings of lethargy and sluggishness. And then that's going to impact your thoughts as well. You think, can't be bothered to make the effort, which again will lead to a further decrease in activity and a further drop in mood. So you'll be able to see that the arrows all go both ways, and that's really to signify that these all interact and impact on each other. With me? So going to go through a case example. Stacey. So obviously there's no real names or information in here, just to protect confidentiality. But Stacey is a 31-year-old female. She works as a teaching assistant, and it's a really stressful environment. She's found that really hard. She's never had any support for her mental health before. She lives with a partner of 5 years. And what she really noticed was she was feeling exhausted, she's feeling stressed, she's feeling guilty, and she's having a lot of problems with her motivation as well. So the type of things that would come out in one of our assessments would be some of the symptoms that Stacey's noticed, some of the changes she's noticed. So she noticed she wasn't taking part in hobbies, she didn't really have the motivation to engage with those anymore. She was avoiding her friends. She thought, no one's going to want to spend time with me. I'm just miserable. I'm not going to enjoy my time. And it's like Nicola said, it's those negative thoughts about others there as well. Stacey is feeling unhappy, underappreciated in her job. She's noticed she's feeling a lot more tearful and more irritable as well. She was arguing a lot more with her partner, and she's feeling trapped and without direction. One of the main difficult thoughts Stacey's having is, I feel like the old happy me has gone missing, and I don't know how to get them back. So if we put kind of Stacey into that cycle of depression and activity now, this is something that she found really helpful, because she noticed she was feeling irritable, lethargic, which then that impacted the behavior. So irritability, she'd argue with her partner more. Lethargy, she's cancelling her nights out, she's not going to the gym. And then that leads to more negative thoughts about herself, which again leads to a further drop in mood, an increase in the physical symptoms, further decrease in the behavior. So sometimes there's not always a specific reason. Sometimes these things can just kind of build up. And this cycle of depression and activity can be really difficult to break out of if you're not aware that you're in it.
So we're going to talk to you now about a really key strategy that we use in cognitive behavioural therapy called behavioural activation. It's a really simple technique. It can become quite complex depending on who you're working with and the level of work you're doing, but it's a really straightforward technique to use. It looks at reintroducing activity back into somebody's life to get that balance back in their life and to help break that cycle of inactivity. And we do this because when people are low in mood or depressed, they feel like they've got no energy and they feel like they need to rest, and they tend to stop doing the things that they've been doing before that's kept them well, that's kept them happy. So when they do start to stop, actually what they need to do is to do more, to get back to doing the things that they were doing previously. But when we're feeling tired and we've got no energy, it's really, really difficult to motivate yourself to go out, to walk the dog, to go to the gym, which is why we use this technique. So it's not just any activity we're looking for to reintroduce, it's a range of activity. As humans, we need a balance of activity across our life to feel satisfied and content. It's not about just going to work every day and being busy doing loads of productive stuff. It's about getting that balance of activities, and that's what we're looking for. So when we're working with someone with depression, we would consider a range of activities that they can start to reintroduce back into their life. So we've separated them into 3 categories here. I'll go through them with you. So we've got routine. So these are things that we would do day to day or week to week, such as housework, cooking or shopping. We've got the necessary things that we have to do, such as paying bills or taking your children to school. We've got the pleasurable things that we get enjoyment from, such as meeting with friends, exercising, listening to music. It's going to be different for everyone. You know, somebody's routine activity will be somebody's pleasurable activity. You know, somebody may really enjoy cooking. So it would be unique to the person that we're working with. But we will be looking at trying to reintroduce a range of different activities to get back that balance to help to lift the mood.
What would you categorize as some of your pleasurable activities, Nicola?
So for me, a pleasurable activity would be, running, would be watching TV, and it would be walking the dog. What about for you, Tom? What would be yours?
So I'd say gardening, football. I'd say walking as well. I like walking, listening to music at the same time.
Yeah. So I'd be looking at getting a range of different activities as well. So this is a really common worksheet that we use in CBT, activity scheduling. Now we use this because actually once it's written down, Anne shared that being outside walking and running works for her as well. Activity scheduling works really well because we all know if we say, oh, I'm going to start swimming next month or I'm going to join the gym next week, we probably won't do it. Whereas if we've written it down, it's there. We've put it out in the universe, it's probably more likely to happen. And if we can be really specific with it as well, so what are we going to do? Where are we going to do it? When are we going to do it? And who are we going to do it with? So it might be, walking the dog Thursday morning at 10 o'clock and I'm going to go with my friend. If we've written it and planned it, we're much more likely to do it. It also takes some of the effort away. If somebody's feeling really depressed, it's a lot of effort to plan things. So if it's already been done, it's almost like that part of it's taken out and they've just got to push themselves to do it. And also by doing this, we can monitor the kind of activities that somebody's doing. So quite often we'll get people who are low in mood, but incredibly busy. They're doing loads of stuff, but actually they're not doing a lot for themselves. So they might be working and then coming home, just looking after the family all evening and weekend, and they're not actually doing a lot for themselves. So it's about adding in some extra time for themselves. Somebody said reading as well. So again, something like reading, if we feel like we're not doing enough and it's something we used to do a lot of, you can start to plan that in. I'm going to read sort of Thursday or Friday evening. Start to plan that in and then you're more likely to do that. So this is why we use activity scheduling. It really helps us to plan what we're going to do ahead. And also cinema as well. Somebody said mobile off and coffee to hand. Yeah, that sounds like a great one as well. And I guess we don't have to wait until we're depressed to do this. If we're feeling a little bit down, we can start to think, right, what could I do at the weekend that's going to help to pick my mood up? It can really help enable you to get into control of your mood and to manage it yourself, to get that level so you don't keep dipping, understanding that I do need to do bits and bobs for myself out the week. So this can be helpful, not just if you're depressed, but actually, you know, just to keep yourself healthy. Yeah, we've got knitting and crafting as well. Yeah, some really good ones there.
I'd always go for a bike ride on a Tuesday, and about 4 p.m. I'd be like, oh, do I really want to go for a bike ride? And then I'd go for my bike ride, and I'm like, oh yeah, I feel great for that bike ride actually. So then the next Tuesday, I'm like, oh, do I want to go? And I'm like, well, actually, I enjoyed the bike ride last week. So I mean, that it's once you start doing it, you realise the value of it as well, don't you?
I think it's particularly with exercise, the thought of it can be quite off-putting, but like Tom said, actually, when you've done it, afterwards, you get that feel-good factor and that natural lift in your mood, which is what we're after. It's almost like that natural antidepressant, and that's what we're looking for. Oh yeah, we've got woodwork, especially, yeah. So we've got some great ideas here. Yeah, some really good ones. Thank you for sharing. So why do we ask people to keep active? Well, as humans, we need occupation. We need a balance of occupation in our lives to keep us satisfied and content. But it also helps with depression. So one of the key symptoms of depression is rumination. And the more time we've got in our heads, the more we're going to ruminate, and we're going to look over the things that we could have done better, that should have gone better. So actually, if we're busy, if we're doing things, we're occupied and we've got less time to ruminate. Activity keeps us out of our minds. It keeps us in the now, living for the moment, and it gives us less time to think over things. It also helps to change how we think about ourselves and about others and how we're seeing the world around us. It gives us a sense of purpose and achievement, and it also gives us energy, which is one of the key things with low mood. When we are low in mood or feeling quite tired and fatigued, we sometimes think we need to rest. But when we're depressed, actually what we need is to create that energy. And you only get that from doing things. I often say to people that I'm working with, don't wait to feel better. Don't wait to start something. Start now. You know, you'll only get that feeling better once you start the doing, if you like. You know, don't wait for that feeling to come, because it won't. We have to create that ourselves. We create our own energy by doing things. So it's really important to do that.
So starting to think a bit more about mindfulness now. So before we really going to go into this, just want people to share what they think mindfulness or meditation is, first of all. So Michael, you were wondering if things have changed much in the past 6 or 7 years. And as far as I'm aware, the technique's been the same for a much longer period than that. But if anyone does feel comfortable sharing, please just share what you think mindfulness or meditation is. And I suppose we can come back to those a little bit later to see where everyone was with that. But mindfulness is just very much about being present in the moment. So your body's always present in the moment, but quite often, we find our minds almost kind of time traveling. We might be worrying about the future, or like Nicholas said, being quite hopeless about the future. We might be ruminating about things that have happened in the past, any kind of regrets, anything we wish we'd done differently, or just thinking about things that have happened in the past that do make us feel low. So as it says here, the primary goal is that non-judgmental awareness. So thoughts will come and go, feelings will come and go, and that's natural. Your mind will wander. You're a human being, so you will have emotions. But mindfulness is around being able to observe that and not getting caught up in it. So the primary focus in most mindful meditation is around the breathing, using that as an anchor to keep you in the moment. So there's a few different ways we can be mindful. One of these is kind of using imagery. So quite often when we're really getting caught up in our thoughts, we get caught up in this almost river, this torrent that's going downstream, and we find it quite hard to fight against that current. So if we imagine, our mind is this river, mindfulness is more about standing on the bank and observing our thoughts as maybe leaves floating down the river, rather than being washed away by those thoughts as they come. So a few benefits of mindfulness now. So reduced rumination. So obviously, we've spoken about activity helping to reduce rumination. But when you're fully in the present, when you're able to bring yourself back to the present, you don't get caught up in that idea of thinking about the past, wishing we could change things that we can't actually change. Our focus and concentration improves as well. And again, it's all about being in the present. If we're fully focused on the moment, it's easier to focus on what we're doing, whether that's work, reading, watching TV or a film. And again, our concentration is better because we are involved with what we're doing. And that also impacts our working memory. If we're able to focus on something and concentrate on it, we retain that in our head. So we're not getting distracted by our thoughts as easily or by other things going on. And it can help to reduce stress and anxiety as well. When we're feeling stressed, when we're feeling anxious, we might often be thinking about, what's happened in the day, how could I have dealt with that better? How am I going to deal with things tomorrow? Whereas when you're mindful, when you're fully in the moment, you're where you are rather than thinking about what could go wrong or what might have gone wrong. It helps develop self-awareness and foster an understanding of ourselves. It helps us to appreciate the little things that are happening right now that we often take for granted. And again, it's when we're kind of stuck in that thinking style of, what's going to happen in the future, what I'm going to have for dinner, what I'm going to have for lunch, what am I going to be doing after this Microsoft Teams presentation, or maybe thinking about what you had for breakfast, or maybe emails you've got to send. We're not really focusing on those little bits that are happening in front of us. It helps us to foster self-compassion. So that's for both ourselves, but also compassion for others as well. It helps us take that step back and consider where we are. And it can also have an overall improvement in quality of life and happiness. And again, that's for all the above reasons. If you're feeling less stressed, less anxious, you're fully focused on what you're doing, you're much more likely to enjoy it a lot more, to get a lot more pleasure out of it. So what is being mindful? So we've got a quote here from Mark Williams. So it's knowing directly what is going on inside and outside ourselves, moment by moment. So it's not just being fully focused on that external world, but in terms of acknowledging, our thoughts that do come up, any emotions that do come up. It's not about, I suppose, distracting yourself from those things. It's acknowledging them as there, but still bringing yourself back to what's currently happening. So it's about being in the present moment, being aware of any thoughts, feelings, bodily sensations, and the environment around us as well. So noticing any smells, sounds, any sensations on your skin, maybe any lingering tastes in your mouth from your breakfast or your morning cup of coffee. And doing all this without judgment, not labeling things as either good or bad, but just acknowledging them as they are. So mindfulness is about doing this in the moment, in the present, and mindful meditation is the skill we use to actually develop this ability to be present in the moment. And it is a technique that should be practiced daily to really get the benefits from it. A few things about what mindfulness is not. It's not a panacea. You do need to meditate regularly or practice bringing yourself into the present regularly to really get the benefits from this. And I think there is kind of research that shows that expert meditators, their experience of things, even such as pain, are much different from novice meditators or people that don't meditate. It's not a relaxation technique. So although when you're in the moment, the chances are you might feel a little bit more relaxed because you're not thinking about, things that have gone wrong or might go wrong. But that's more of a happy side effect than the point. The meditation is about being present in the moment. It's not for everyone. Some people don't always get the benefits that we have outlined. And it is always beneficial. But if you do have trauma, then it's more effective when used and approached by an experienced therapist.
So meditation's powerful stuff, Tom, by the sounds of it.
Yeah, I'd say it's life-changing.
So I've just reading the comments that people have put about what mindfulness is, and yeah, I'm not going to read them all because there's lots down there. But yes, you're all right. It is all of those things that you've written down there. So thank you very much for sharing your thoughts on that. So we're going to do a short mindfulness exercise with you. This is called the 3 minutes breathing space, and it's a really, really effective one to use during the day if you start to feel that you're starting to get a bit stressed or overwhelmed. Using this can really help. I'm going to talk you through, so do a guided one with you now and talk you through the first, the 3 steps of this. And what we might do, I might see if I can get a link for it as well and share it on the chat, so it can be something you can use after as well. I don't know what people's previous experience of mindfulness are before. So yeah, let's just take you into this and give yourself a few minutes to experience this short exercise. So I'm going to invite you all now to, I'm assuming you're all sitting, but yeah, get yourself comfy wherever you are. Placing your feet flat on the floor, just allowing your shoulders just to relax and soften. Head is upright, facing forwards, hands laying soft, relaxed on your lap. And if you feel comfortable to do so, closing your eyes for this exercise. So the first step, just going to check in on your thoughts. So just checking in and noticing what your thoughts are, what's going on in your mind at the moment. So perhaps worries about the day before, thinking about what you've got to do after this presentation. Just checking in what's going on in your mind. Moving now to your mood. So checking in, noticing what mood you have. What emotions are there with you right now? So almost like an internal weather report. Just checking in and finding out what's going on for you right now. I'm going to invite you now to gently move that focus away from thoughts and feelings to your breath. And picking your breath up in your abdomen. And noticing the movement of your abdomen as you breathe in and it rises. And as you release that breath, and your abdomen relaxes. Keeping your focus on your breath, following the journey of your breath and noticing the movement in your abdomen as you breathe in and you breathe out. And as you're doing this, your mind will wander, and that's okay. Notice where it's gone and gently bring it back to the breath. Using the breath as an anchor to come back to. Noticing the movement in your abdomen as you breathe in. Each new breath and breathe out. The last step of this exercise, I'm going to ask you on the next out breath to keep the focus on that and expand it to focus on your whole body as well. So almost as if you're breathing into your whole body, becoming aware of any feelings you may have internally, or perhaps on your skin, fuzzy feeling, any aches or pains, not trying to change, simply notice. So almost as if you're breathing into your whole body and your breath and body become one. Again, as you're doing this, your mind will wander, and that's okay. Gently bring it back to focusing on the breath and the body. And then on the next out breath, keeping that expanded focus, that expanded awareness, and gently bringing yourself back to the screen and gently opening your eyes. Thank you for taking part with that, if you did, or listening if you didn't. Hope you enjoyed that. If you've got any comments, please share them on the chat.
Thank you, Nicola. That was lovely.
Yeah, got a thank you from
Feeling
Henry.
very relaxed now.
Yeah.
So again, mindfulness is very much about being in the present moment. These are some graphics I always like to use to really kind of show mindfulness. So quite often people's heads kind of full, what if it breaks down? All these bills coming through the post, what am I going to have for dinner? Songs stuck in your head. Whereas generally, your dog goes to the park, he's just thinking about the park, he's thinking about sniffing where other dogs have been and marking his own territory. And a lot of people often think that meditation is more like this. It's about, not having any thoughts, having a completely clear and empty mind, which is, a huge kind of misconception. And if people are aiming that, then they'll often think, actually, the meditation's not working for me, mindfulness isn't working for me. So again, it's just about being fully in the present moment, being aware of, where you are, being aware of your body, your thoughts, but also the environment that's around you as well. And I suppose that's where we start to think about mindfully engaging in activity, actually starting to bring both the behavioral activation and the mindfulness together. So when we plan in an activity and we're kind of fully engaged with it, we get a lot more out of it. And I remember I've worked with people in the past who they've scheduled all their activities in, they're doing all their activities, in that balanced way as well, kind of the routine, the necessary and the pleasurable, but they weren't getting the benefit. But once we broke it down, they realized actually they were clock watching the entire time, they were trying to do so much and they weren't actually doing any of their activities mindfully. So when we broke it down and took it back to, actually doing each activity with the full focus on it, that's when they started to notice the benefits of engaging in those activities when they were doing them mindfully. So if we approach each activity with this curious and open approach, maybe even pretending it's the first time we've done this activity, it can really help us to get the most out of it. So we're not thinking about what you need to do next, what you've just done, being fully present in each activity. So even if you have a cup of tea or a cup of coffee after this, take 5 minutes break from looking at your emails if you can, and just notice any sensations of that coffee, the warmth of the mug, the taste, the smell, how it feels when it goes into your mouth or when you swallow. So really fully.
Yeah. Sorry, Tom, I was just going to add into that. Yeah, the sound of the kettle boiling is always a good one. We hear it so many times a day, but how many times do we actually listen to it? Actually sort of spend a moment listening to the sound of the kettle boiling and hear the water pouring. Yeah, I think making a hot drink, doing that mindfully, something we do and skip through several times a day, we pause and do that mindfully, I think it's a really good place to start. Sorry, Tom.
And I'd even say the same for when you go for your lunch, or if you're having any cake to celebrate the NHS's birthday. Happy birthday, NHS, again. Just eating, mindfully, taking a note, because it's very often that people have their lunch or their dinner and they'll try and rush through the meal to get on to the next thing, and they won't really enjoy their dinner. So it's using your five senses in that curious way. Noticing the smells of the food, sounds, textures, any kind of tastes as well.
We've got, sorry, Tom, we've got a question from Jeffrey Carr about, I've done this before in a quiet room with eyes closed. How is it possible to do this outside walking or doing a daily task? So it's probably quite a good point to bring in the senses here, and talk that through for that question. So yeah, how would Jeffrey mindfully engage with walking outside?
So I think especially if you're in nature, it's a great place to be mindful. There's the sound of the wind through the leaves, maybe it's even the sounds of the cars going past, but you can even notice the sensation of each time your foot hits the floor, just feelings of actually moving itself, the sensation of the air on your skin, on your face, any wind, maybe the sun, the feeling of warmth. And it's just trying to bring your attention back. So trying to notice, are there any smells? So say if you're walking near any flowers, could you actually kind of stop and smell the flowers? If you're walking past a tree, could you put your hand on the bark? Or maybe, I think there's a lot of pine cones at the moment, pick up a pine cone and see how that feels. And if you're feeling really brave, you can take your shoes off and walk in the mud, or maybe eat some berries if there are there. Generally above waist height's my recommendation for safety, but it's easier to do it in a quiet room because there's less distractions. But I suppose it's actually noticing those things that you might consider distractions mindfully as well.
I think when you're out walking, as you said, Tom, focusing on your feet as you're placing that on the ground and how the ground feels beneath your feet is a really good place to start. I would say don't expect to do it for a long period of time, a couple of minutes, because your mind will just wander. So don't put too much pressure on yourself. I have to do this 30-minute walk mindfully, because it probably won't happen. But just every now and again, bring yourself completely into where you are, into your surroundings. Yeah, it's probably a good place to start.
I think that's a really good expectation set. And don't expect yourself to be mindful 24 hours a day, because I think even the people whose life is kind of dedicated to this, Buddhist monks or other people, they will probably still get distracted and not be mindful the entire day. So it's being kind to yourself when your mind does get pulled away and gently bringing it back to where you want it to be.
So we've got a couple of questions, Tom, about how long we should be mindful for each day. So one about how, mindfulness exercise, and it just varies. So I think perhaps 30 minutes would be ideal, but not everybody's going to be able to do that. It'd be really hard to be mindful the whole day, but perhaps using some of the things that we do regularly, like brushing your teeth, making your dinner, making your cups of coffee, trying to bring the mindfulness into that. It just gives your brain a break as well. It just allows it just to focus on exactly what you're doing rather than thinking ahead, right, I need to get back to doing this. Just lets you be in that moment for that short period of time.
Yeah, I fully agree with that. So the last thing to really consider is, if you do notice your mood's getting worse or your energy levels are slipping, this is when mindfulness and behavioral activation can be the most helpful. And again, it's one of those things, when we feel worse, we often think, actually, I need to do less. But when we do feel really low, and it seems almost counterintuitive, it's what Nicola was saying before, this is actually a time where we need to start kind of planning in activities, taking that time in the day to be more mindful of what we're doing. And that's something that can really help, can boost the well-being and boost your mood.
Yeah. and don't wait to feel like doing it. You know, plan it in. You know, we can control our own mood by what we're doing, so getting on top of that before the mood drops. We've got a couple of questions, Tom, so I'll just go through these. So I've got one to say, so would you say it's more about focusing on the senses than the thoughts? So yes, it's definitely more about focusing on the senses and the thoughts. It's about bringing yourself into yourself, really. So we're not our thoughts, so it's really about grounding yourself, coming away from what we're thinking. Somebody's also mentioned about struggling to keep focus, mind wandering off. They find guided meditations better. Yes, they're a lot easier to follow. Doesn't matter how many times your mind wanders, you're still being mindful. It's the noticing that we're after. So even if you notice your mind's wandered several times, it's the bringing it back is the key thing.
I'd say, you know, you could meditate kind of for years, you know, I have, and still sometimes when I meditate, my mind wanders. And I suppose it's not about chiding yourself, like saying, you know, actually, I've noticed, because that, like Nicola says, that's the thing that is really the goal. Notice where you've gone and being able to bring yourself back.
Okay.
So I think that's us. I mean, if anyone has any more questions, then please do ask them. And I'll hand you back over to Dawn while you ask them.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us today.
Thank you. What a fantastic session. I feel a little bit too relaxed to talk, but a brilliant session. If anybody, there is a question in the chat just around if we could have a copy of the PowerPoint presentation slides. I guess a lot of those images would potentially help people as well. But if anyone has got any questions, please feel free to post those in the chat box, or if you want to come on camera and ask them yourselves, you can do that as well, because your cameras have been enabled. Whilst you do that, I will share the screen and just talk through a couple more slides for you. So if anyone has been affected, not just by this session, but by any of the sessions that you've seen so far, there's some information in terms of support and advice. There's some contact details on there that you can get in touch with as well. So relaxed, I'm so relaxed. And also feedback is always a gift. So if, oh, sorry, before I go there is a question. So do NHS workers still have free access to Headspace? I believe they do.
I'm not sure.
I'm not sure if that's expired or not. I know we did have it, but yeah, I don't know if it's still open to us.
I think it was
initially, if anyone knows,
if anyone knows, please.
Yeah, if anyone knows, pop it in the chat. I thought we did. Yes, until the end of 2023.
That's good.
We absolutely do. Yes. So there's more than one person has said that. Oh, 3 people have said that. So yes, absolutely. Brilliant. I think it's until the end of 2022. So just going back to feedback, if you know, feedback is a gift. So please do provide feedback. We'd love to hear it. The link, the feedback form has been posted in the chat box. You have also got the QR code, and you will be submitted into a prize draw to win a year's subscription to the Happy News, if you choose to do that. In terms of more resources, there are more activities and resources to support your wellbeing. That is on the Wellbeing Festival website, and there is a QR code there to take you to the Wellbeing website as well. And that link is in the chat box. Now, in terms of the Virtual Wellbeing Festival, you can see all of the lineups in front of you. You will also find that on the main festival page. And if you use that QR code, you can pop into there as well and see what tickles your fancy, because there's something there for everybody. And then in terms of getting social, please use the platforms Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, just to share your feedback, your reflections on what you've seen so far. It would be great to sort of hear all of that. And if you can use the hashtag Virtual Wellbeing Festival 22. And lastly, I just want to thank you all for joining the session, and thanks to Nicola and Tom for a fantastic session today as well. And I hope that you get to enjoy lots more. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.